Zach, what about that infamous book that was top of the New York Times bestsellers list for ages and ages and ages? Joan Peters from Time Immemorial. You must have shaken your head a few times having to work with that material. But her idea is that it was only the dynamic Jews from Europe who really shook up that place. And it was the Jews who offered job opportunities and brought in the people who later called themselves Palestinians. Now, it was a fantasy. It was treated as something very, very serious indeed.
This article that I shared earlier by Auerbach, he mentions this point that in the beginning of the 20th century and throughout British mandatory rule, Zionist land development and work prospects attracted Arabs from Middle Eastern countries. This is part of the Zionist propaganda that because the Zionists were so diligent and so resourceful, they attracted all of these immigrants from Egypt and from Transjordan and from Syria and wherever else to Palestine. From beginning to end, this is really just propaganda. There's I don't think any credible evidence to believe this ever happened. So this book, I believe in the comments, someone even mentioned, this is Joan Peters' book, which came out in the early 80s. And as you pointed out, there was a stream of positive reviews that came out immediately after the book got published. And of course, those reviewers in the initial, say, 6 to 12 months after the book was published, weren't historians. They didn't check the facts. They couldn't actually audit the research. And so it got all this positive press. And so this myth propagated. Of course, once the actual historians started to, and the actual researchers started to dig in, it turned out the thing was a gigantic fraud. In the words of Yehoshua Porath, who is, in my opinion, probably one of, if not the most serious historian of British mandatory Palestine and Palestinian history under the British Mandate, he calls this, quote, a sheer fraud. It was literally a fraudulent piece of research. In fact, Norman Finkelstein, his PhD dissertation was a line-by-line rebuttal of this book, okay? He literally spent 5 years of his life going through this book, sifting through every single footnote, every single source, and determined that the entire thing was a fraud. She literally falsified evidence, took sentences out of context, falsified data. Remember, she was looking at demographic data and was just loose and fast with the numbers, literally statistical falsities. And so, anyways, basically every serious historian since to have looked at this book, going down the line, Norman Finkelstein, Yehoshua Porath, Alexander Cockburn, Ian Gilmore, literally every single person who's looked at this work has concluded that it's propaganda.
Yes, since Norman Finkelstein demolished it, but before Finkelstein demolished it, it was being praised to the heavens by elite reviewers. It was being promoted as the last word in Palestinian history. I mean, quite remarkable. Finkelstein did a brilliant job on that. Did he not?
I completely agree with you. And I mean, Norman Finkelstein, by the way, what a serious scholar. I mean, for whatever reason, he's developed this reputation as a controversial figure and as somebody who says controversial things. But when you look at his actual research, look at his reports he's published on the Gaza wars in 2008 and 2014, he is one of the most rigorous, the most serious scholars living today, period, hands down. No one does more serious work than Norman Finkelstein. And what's most impressive about Norman is that not only how serious his work is, but he has skin in the game and he's lost so much. I mean, he was fired, was it way back in the day, for the positions he was taking and the quote unquote controversial research he was doing, which by the way, wasn't even really all that controversial, saying that the Holocaust industry exploits the Holocaust for political gain. I don't even think it's controversial anymore, but back when he wrote it, it was. So all of that is just to say, like, Joan Peters' work is thoroughly debunked. And anyone who propagates that myth, including Mr. Auerbach here, or Dr. Auerbach here, is propagating things that have been debunked decades ago.